Welcome to Proof Points, a podcast by Latham High-Tech Seeds. Family owned and farm proven for more than 75 years, Latham Seeds is growing strong. Now, here's product manager and host of Proof Points, Steve Sick.
Well, welcome to Proof Points. I'm here with Michael Tice this morning, RSM in Iowa for Latham High-Tech Seeds. How are you today?
Hey, good morning, Steve. We're doing really good here. It's a cool morning so far, considering what we were last week. So things were a little stressed as far as the corn side last week, but hopefully this cool weekend and weather kind of helps relieve some of that stress. So things are looking pretty good for the most part, considering could use a shot of rain though.
Good. How are things progressing in your area then? I mean, overall, east to west.
Yeah, for the majority of the growing season, I'd say we're dry, from May and June. Then we're able to, make up some ground in July. We got some nice timely rains. And now we're to that point where, with grain fill, pollination and grain fill, we could use another rain here in August. So we're holding on. The potential is still there, but could use some, like I said, some rainfalls here to close us out here and have a really good crop.
Right. Yeah, the key to heat during pollination is keeping that temperature down below 70 degrees at night. If we've accomplished that, you're not going to affect yield too much. You're going to lose probably some pollen. It's going to kill some pollen during the day on those high heat days. But the humidity really saved us for sure. I'm sure you've had no issue with humidity over there.
Yeah, agreed. Yep, it was. Yeah, at least there's humidity in the air. There were some nights where it was right around that 70 degrees for a low. So I know some customers and dealers are a little concerned with it, but I guess it's all out of our control. But like you said, the humidity and moisture in the air definitely did help a lot. So it wasn't a dry, intense heat or anything like that.
Yeah, and then on the soybean side, I mean, typically if you get a lot of heat, you'll get a little bit more flower abortion than what would typically like for sure. But otherwise, soybeans typically that canopy will keep things cool enough. It shouldn't be too bad. However, you might lose a little bit off the top end, but I think you're in good shape on the soybean side.
Mm-hmm. No, the beans are looking pretty good too. 30-inch rows really started closing up on canopy in last 7 to 10 days. So,
good.
I guess with the heat and stuff, thing to look out is for white mold. But the heat, I know we don't really have to worry about it. But I know it's one thing guys are now concerned of with the canopying and moisture. But the heat, hopefully, suppress any white mold that we could potentially see here in August. But as far as the beans, they haven't seen any much insect pressure, white mold, or any disease so far in the northeastern part of the state. Some spotty spots with Phytophthora, but not whole entire fields or anything like that yet. So we're still waiting to see what August has in store for us on the beans.
Right. Yeah, typically, I mean, you could run into some SDS issues with the hot, dry weather coming up, but that you had. But I've seen a little bit out there, but I have not noticed much disease or insect pressure either. Just a lot of rootworm beetles in the corn, some in the soybeans, but I noticed there's a lot of planes, a lot of spraying going on right now. A lot going on in your area as far as fungicide, insecticide application?
Yeah, for sure. For the most part, the consensus is it's as far as the rootworm beetles, it's been really spotty. It's been by a per field basis. It hasn't been every field that I've sprayed. I've seen rootworm beetles. It's just been by the field, and that's been traded corn all the way from a smart stacks to conventional. It just seems to be the consensus so far, but I mean, they're still thick out there. Should still be throwing an insecticide out there, but it's not been as bad as I think last year, where there was rootworm beetles consensus across, a farmer would say all my farms had beetles everywhere. So I'm not sure if the conditions made any impact on that, or if we're getting ahead of these populations. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. We may be getting ahead of it and staying in front of it, which is always good, obviously. So is there any specific products that stand out to you, corn and soybeans?
I say on the corn, especially with this heat and dry weather, one of our new products here in 2024 5336. It's one of our new Power Core corn varieties.
Huh?
It just seems to be handling the stress better. It's stayed, the greenness has stayed really intact and just looks phenomenal so far. So it's kind of been through the ringer in a lot of the plots and fields that we've seen it in, and it's been able to hold its own. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out this fall, especially through what it's been through as far as these dry weather conditions. And so 20 are, and then on the soybeans, the one that comes to my mind is 2031. So
Hmm.
I kind of have guys who prefer all the way from a 1.6 to a 2.5 bean. So that one's kind of in the smack dab middle, or smack dab in the middle, where guys are
Uh-huh.
really looking forward to that, 2.0 to 2.2 range, and it's just looked phenomenal all year. It's emergence was great, and one of the first one to canopy on 30-inch rows. So guys that like that, it hasn't seen any disease pressure or anything so far this year. So I know it's one that we're excited for and one I'm excited to talk about here throughout the entire fall. So
Uh-huh. Yeah, 2031 is one of those new launches, like you mentioned. That's a Peking source SCN, good disease package, and that will be a big player. I agree. It seemed to handle the heat very well. On the corn side, 5336, I've noticed that with a lot of the power cores. They seem to have a waxier underside of the leaf, and they really seem to be tolerating that heat last week really well across all regions, not just in yours.
no, I agreed. It's the power core ones maybe just a tad bit cooler to walk in during
Hmm.
pollination versus some of these other ones. They make it a little cooler in the canopy a little bit, but I don't know if we should be walking in 90 plus degree heat in corn, but it's what we got to do.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely not fun for anybody out there, even including the plants themselves. So, I mean, how does it look like it's going to pan out? For the rest of your area all the way through the fall. I know we're ways off yet from harvest, as you mentioned. Just finishing up pollination and got good kernel setting, but things looking pretty good setting up going into the fall.
Yeah, like I said, the potential's there. We just need timely rains. There's been, I know, a lot of questions last week. Guys was spraying the fungicide, insecticide, and you already hit on it with the heat, with the humidity in the air. It didn't really affect too much things, but there hasn't been any disease pressure, at least in my territory. And so guys are then wondering, do I cut my costs? But I think with with the potential we're at, despite the dry weather, I'd still feed everything I got into it.
Hmm.
Half inch in a week, or as little as that can make a hell of a difference. So
Yeah,
I think the potential is there for this fall, and we just got to keep our foot on the gas here and do what we can to protect that yield.
yeah, I would agree. I don't think there's ever a bad time for fungicide application, even insecticide anymore. We still got some late flushes coming for sure. So protect that yield, especially with some of the prices, kind of up and down and spiking in some areas and dropping in others. You always want to protect what you have out there for sure.
Yeah, was curious on your thoughts on soybeans. What's your typical application timing for fungicide there? And do you throw in the insecticide no matter what, or do you kind of spot and scout and see on the soybeans?
Typically, it's always good cheap insurance to throw an insecticide in with a fungicide. We're almost getting a little late for a fungicide application. Once you start setting pods, it's not going to do a whole lot of good. It's better to protect it right as soon as you got basically, flowers up and down the whole plant. So if you're starting to set pods, you got pods on probably 2 to 4 nodes, I would probably shy away from it. I don't think it would really pay. Uh, Otherwise, no, I think a fungicide insecticide on soybeans is, to me, it's more beneficial than corn. Now, the one thing I would say is spraying a fungicide on a soybean, typically you're going to delay maturity, probably 3 to 7 days, in my opinion, sometimes longer, depending on if we catch some late season rain. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're spraying fungicides. Have you seen anything different, Mike?
No, I haven't. I like your term cheap insurance. A lot of guys are wondering, or a lot of farmers are wondering if it's even worth throwing out insecticide. And I said, well, if you're making the pass already, like you mentioned, cheap insurance, that's a pretty good term to use there, where hopefully you get even a little residual if there are some insect pressure to show up, and the overall benefits you're getting with the fungicide though as well. Like I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
it's a good
Typically,
point.
I mean, today's fungicide insecticides have really good residual activity. So, I mean, unless they pores right after you put it on, typically they'll stay in a plant and last long enough to definitely do some good for sure.
Oh,
So
that
one other thing that we've got coming up is obviously we're coming up into field day season where we get to showcase our trials. Do you have any good tips or anything to prepare for field days coming up?
make sure you have water on ice to stay hydrated. That'd be the good thing. And I challenge everyone to especially attend one of our Latham field days is to
Mm-hmm.
come up with 2 or 3 questions that you know to come up with, and don't hesitate to ask, because more than likely someone else has probably got those same questions, but maybe they're just too shy to ask. So those are that'd be the big thing, is to come in with questions, because we all learn together. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
someone else is experiencing what you're experiencing, and then we can come up with a solution together. But or maybe we already have a solution in store for you on the question that you're having. So um, that's the big thing that I would advise, is to don't
Mm-hmm.
hesitate to come. Questions or things that you're seeing as well, and maybe advice for all of us at these field days. It's a crucial time for all of us to learn and to improve our operation. So
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point, Michael. I mean, that's probably the most underrated thing that would go on at field days is it's in a small group setting typically, and get to ask questions more on a one-on-one personal basis with smaller people in your area. And I think that's an excellent point. Just don't be afraid to ask it. There's no such thing as a dumb question ever out there.
what about you, Steve? What are your go-to field day tips or advice?
I mean, to me, it's always good to see it in your local area. I would recommend a local field day over a bigger national field day any day of the week. Like you said, for one thing we just talked about, you can get more local advice, you can get more local opinions, and you see how things do in your area. We can provide all the yield information, data from a national source or from a regional source that we want. But obviously, what it comes down to is how it affects, your bottom line, your farm, what it looks like there. And the best way to do that is by looking at a local field day, because more than likely, if it's even if it's tough conditions and maybe your crops are drying up, well, there may be something you can learn from that. There's more to learn from that than there is just from a straight high yield, flat out yield situation.
No,
So
I
that's my
agreed.
advice.
No, I agreed. Despite the low disease and insect pressure, there are many things to take away, especially in my area. Walking
Mm-hmm.
through a corn plot, or even it's a side-by-side field. I know the generic, oh, it's nothing to see out there or anything. I highly disagree with that. So
Yeah. Yep.
it's amazing to see how these roots grow in these dry conditions, especially whether it's clay or sandy soil. Just see the differences, and that's crucial in years like this, on being able to handle variable soils and variable
Mm-hmm.
conditions. So
Oh, that's
no,
a good point.
it's yeah, it's I agree. So
Yeah, I mean, the other thing you can do is definitely bring a shovel along, dig some roots. As Michael suggested, go out, look at the root mass, see things that are maybe a little greener, or what they got for a root structure compared to something that's not quite as green. And you can learn the same thing on soybeans. They give you a good time to look at your nodulation, see if they're good nodules, whether they're dead nodules. I mean, there's just a lot you can learn, just more than looking at an ear and a stalk from the end. So highly encourage you to get into the field, not just look at it from the end.
no, exactly, good points.
So no, and with that, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Proof Points. Thanks for tuning in and have a great week.